Once again this month, our power pollers weigh in on a fresh set of questions, including, should the city of Chicago renew its deal with NASCAR for racing on the streets of Chicago? Who's a stronger presidential candidate for Democrats and the organization of being a good presidential candidate, JB or Rahm? And are you satisfied with the city's progress in reducing crime? Welcome to our July 25 edition of the Power Poll Podcast. Once again, we welcome the wisdom of Mike Flannery to the conversation. Mike is, as we always say, the dean of Chicago political reporters. Thanks for being here, Mike.
And great to be here, Tom.
Great to have you. And our special guest this month is the familiar face from the CBS 2 10 o'clock news and an award-winning Chicago journalist, Linda MacLennan. It's so nice to see you. Welcome to the show.
Nice to see both of you. We go way, way back. I won't say how many years because, that wouldn't be nice. But yeah, it's great to see you guys.
Well, thank you for joining us. We'll get right to the first question. City officials will soon decide whether to renew the deal with NASCAR to hold the street race through Grant Park and along the lakefront. What best describes your opinion? Our power pollers weighed in. 29% said yes, it's great for the city's national exposure. 15% said no, the city loses money on it. 34% said yes, if they pick an alternative date, there is too much going on over the July 4th weekend. And 22% said no, unless the city can make a better financial deal. Wow, 29% want the city for the national exposure of the race, and 34% said yes, but not on the July 4th weekend. Linda, you're our guest this week. What's your take on that? How do you think our power pollers did on that answer to the question?
It started after I had left Chicago, so I never was physically there to watch it. I was living in the Loop when I left, and the idea was floated then, and I thought, but then again, I thought, yeah, it'll be loud, it'll be noisy, it'll be dirty, whatever. But it also brings people to the Loop on a July 4th weekend, and the Loop tends to empty out on the weekend. So I don't know. I get the point about not wanting to make bad traffic worse, but it does seem to become popular.
Right, and it does fill up the city. Let me tell you something.
Yeah,
I still live downtown, and it's jammed. Mike, what's your analysis?
Well, I saw that the New York Times sports section, The Athletic, reports that NASCAR wants to cut a deal. They want to come back. They want to renew this as long as they can get a good deal, mirroring what the City Hall is saying. I think, though, Tom, that given the multiple music festivals and other things that happen during the summer, the downtown parks, Grant Park and large sections there are closed too often during the prime season. Now, look, I get the international and national exposure that this brings. It was interesting, though, to note that the ratings were down for this last contest, this last race, and I'd like to see some quantification, some objective study. How much exposure? What's the value of it? Monetize it. Explain it for me.
The one thing that's happened to me in the last couple of races is that I find myself out of town, but I turn on the television set on NBC, I think it is, and the shot of the lakefront and the race going on, it's just wonderful. All of a sudden, it elevates the city to, if you live here in the city and deal with the issues day in and day out, it's wonderful to get, that look and that, that Sunday morning nice clothes on that we used to wear all the time to go to church. All of a sudden the city's all dressed up. I love it. I think they have to do what you both suggest. They have to focus on how do you make this benefit the city. It's a great opportunity to showcase the world, especially with all the foreign companies and the and the owners from overseas that are currently running in NASCAR. It's a worldwide sport. I think it's be wonderful. My pick was was the 34%. I picked let's find a good date. If the 4th is too busy, let's find a good date somewhere. But I think they ought to do it. It's great exposure. And the other problem I have is when they close off the streets.
Yeah.
That's difficult for everybody to get around. But in Europe they do it, and they remove the barricades overnight so that people the following morning can go back to work. Here, it takes 2 days for them to clear the streets and reopen Lakeshore Drive. That's not good.
Thom, can I also say that now living somewhere else, I'm particularly sensitive to how other people view Chicago. And I was reading something not too long ago, and people were still taking pot shots about Chicago and the crime and all that stuff. I think anytime the city can bask in the wonderful positives about the city in front of a different outside audience, I think that's something to applaud. But again, at what cost? I hope the city is getting a good deal for this, because it definitely is disruptive. It might be great from a PR standpoint, but it definitely is disruptive for people that live and drive around it.
Right. Mike, do you have anything to add before we go on to our next question?
That says it all.
All right. That's something you won't hear from Mike very often. Okay. Question number 2. We asked power pollers, it looks like former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel is considering a bid for the Democratic nomination for president in 2028. There's also talk in political circles that Governor J.B. Pritzker may be planning the same. Which potential candidate do you think has the strongest ability to succeed? Who can put that organization together and make it happen? 57% said the former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel. 43% said Governor J.B. Pritzker. And on this one, we are lucky to have Mike with us, the Dean of Political Insiders. Mike, what's your take on that one?
Well, I think both of them are definite dark horses. I think they're outside the circle of likely finishers. You look at those first caucuses and primaries, and then I think a few weeks after those have commenced, how the field begins to shrink down. At this point, I think you'd have to say that both Rahm and J.B. Pritzker are definite dark horses.
Huh.
Right.
Linda?
Linda?
I was reading there was an interview with Rahm recently, and he said, it will really be rather awkward if we're both facing off against each other, two Chicago, Illinois politicos. And, but also, Pritzker, I thought earlier on, I forget what the issue was. I think maybe it was immigration, really was talking sort of presidential and got a lot of coverage.
I think that Rahm, is a very smart guy. He doesn't have the personal enormous multi-billion-dollar wealth that the governor has, but he can raise money. That's how he really broke into national politics. He was a fundraiser for Bill Clinton back in the 1990s. Look, it also seems to me, Thom and Linda, that former Mayor Emanuel is picking a different lane than J.B. Pritzker has chosen. He was on. He's been on a number of talk shows and podcasts, and he's interviewed with influential columnists at the New York Times and elsewhere, and he's talked about how he wants to run a campaign that focuses on families and taxpayers sitting in their kitchen. That's the room he wants to focus on when they're in their kitchen and they're trying to make that household budget, and they're worried about paying taxes, and they're worried about having money left over at the end of the month. And he says too many Democrats, the former mayor has said on these national forums, too many Democrats, he says, are focused on the locker room and the bathroom. He
Right.
wants to focus on that other room.
Right, right. And he's talked about the American dream, the so-called American dream, and he says we got to reestablish what the American dream is. Exactly what you're saying, Mike. It's the middle class people, it's the people who are struggling to get homes, the people who are struggling to buy the groceries. He said that's the American dream, and too many people are not able to achieve it. So we got to sort of rethink that. He did say that, interesting quote, he did say the Democrats are fully caffeinated, double espresso. Now, Mike, what do you think? Are the Democrats fully caffeinated right now?
Well, I think the activists are. I think that I think what I hear Rahm saying is let's not talk about these gender issues.
Right.
He clearly believes there are one public opinion survey after another shows that it's a big win issue. It's a winning issue for Republicans. It was clearly one of the issues that gave President Trump a boost in the last go round. And Rahm seems to be saying, let's get off that stuff. Let's get away from the gender, cultural, social issues. Let's focus on economics. Let's focus on what the Trump Republican tax plan is doing to Americans of all sorts, American families of every type, in their household budgets. Let's look at what cuts in various programs are doing, and in terms of what goes on in locker rooms and bathrooms, nah, let's not so much talk about that.
Well, you can't win a national race today without tacking towards the middle. And that's the problem the Democrats have right now. They're kind of in disarray looking for a leader. I think Rahm, 15 years ago was responsible for electing a majority in the United States House of Representatives, giving Barack Obama the opportunity to pass health care, Obamacare, and other things with that veto-proof majority. And he did that by electing 47 blue dog Democrats, conservative Democrats, many of them pro-life. So he's using these issues to illustrate what it means to tack towards the middle, to talk about common sense, kitchen type issues. It's almost reminds me of Hubert Humphrey from the old days. So he's talking about what it was like for your dad to grow up as a Democrat, and I think that works in today's scenario. And I would pay. I wouldn't pay to see anybody, talk on stage as a politician, but I would pay to see his debate with J.D. Vance or whoever the Republican candidate would be. He's the only one on the national stage today, I believe, that can go toe-to-toe with a Trump person or Donald Trump himself. He has the chutzpah, and he's fearless, and he's learning how to smile more often.
I will say that I thought that J.B. Pritzker did a good job when he was summoned by that House Republican Oversight Committee and spent
Yes.
8 or 9 hours in the hot seat, seated between New York Governor Kathy Hochul and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. I thought that Pritzker did a good job there. I'm not going to gainsay his skills as a potential candidate, but I will say Rahm's got that old gutter fighter. He's got that gut level instinct for combativeness.
Who
And
has more baggage? Who has more baggage that might cause a problem?
Rahm clearly does, Linda. I mean, I am put in mind of 6 or 8 hours I spent with Senator Bernie Sanders a few years ago. He was in to campaign for Chuy Garcia when the congressman got into the mayoral runoff against Emmanuel. And if I had a nickel for every time in that 6 or 8 hours that Bernie Sanders told me at length about his distaste for Rahm and how much he despises Rahm's positions I'd have several dollars. I would have been able to buy a really fancy beer at a downtown tavern. Um, so there's something about Rahm that drives the left wing of the Democratic Party out of its mind. And you can see some of the activists here in Chicago, the way they've responded to Rahm's talk about running for president. They're frothing at the mouth about it. They're infuriated.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right about that congressional hearing. I thought the governor, stood tall and above of course, the competition was what it was, but he was heads and shoulders over that. And the Republicans on that panel as well, I thought they were lackluster and ill prepared. And he nailed it. I would agree with you 100%. Any more, Linda, before we move to the next one?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground about those two, at least at this very early stage.
That's right. I forgot, Linda. Just take a minute here. Are you from Canada?
Yes, originally.
I remember that. My family is from Quebec. My mother's family is from Quebec.
Right.
And you still have a little bit of that accent. I picked it up, as you were talking. Yes, that's terrific. I love to hear that.
Drum it out of me when I was there, but give me a few glasses of wine, it really comes out, I think.
Good for you. Okay, our third question for Power Pollers. Chicago has seen a 33% drop in homicides and an historic decline in violent crime during the first half of 2025. But concerns remain, especially in light of the July 2nd mass shooting in which 4 people died and 14 were wounded. How satisfied are you with the city's progress on reducing crime? 3% said they were very satisfied. The improvements are noticeable and effective. 35% said somewhat satisfied. Progress is good, but more needs to be done. 18% said somewhat dissatisfied. The drop isn't enough given ongoing incidents. 42% said very dissatisfied. Crime remains a major issue despite the statistics. And 2% said they were unsure, no opinion. I'll go to you, Linda. This is just a common sense issue. That mass shooting took place 2 blocks here from my office. And, when it's close to home, even though it may be less frequent, it still kind of freaks you out. What's your take on that question?
I'm not surprised by those numbers. Actually, maybe I am surprised. I'm a bit surprised that so many people, relatively speaking, think that progress is being made. I always am a bit skeptical about the crime statistics too. I'm a little bit, okay. So there's that. But I mean, if some real progress has been made, good for the city, because it sure needed to be made. But I don't know. I'm sure there's still lots more to be done. I'm not really that surprised with those reactions.
Right, Mike.
Well, I will say, Linda, our former colleague Pam Zeckman, who won just about every prize there is to be won in American journalism in her long and storied career, once did a dissection of the crime stats, and the one stat that she agreed was pretty close to accurate was homicides, because you can't bury, you can't hide a human body for the most part. And so I do think there's been a real decline. Now, it's worth noting that that's also happening in big cities all around the country. This peak that we had after COVID has subsided. I will say a woman who doesn't get enough credit for what's going on is Eileen O'Neill Burke, the still relatively new Cook County State's attorney. She is working much more closely with the Chicago Police Department than her predecessor did. The number of inmates in the county jail is up by several hundred over the level, the number of inmates who were there before she was state's attorney. And who could have guessed that if we lock up more of the shooters and killers, that there might be fewer shootings and killings?
Right. As long as you're on the subject, and we're on the subject of the mayor, he vetoed the other day those spot curfews that police officers would have been able to do at their discretion. What was your take on that, Mike?
You know, he's got a point that a large majority of the people who've been arrested in these so-called teen trends, these teen takeovers in the Loop and elsewhere downtown, a large majority of the arrests in those cases have been people over the age of 18. Some of them in their 30s, with long records of causing trouble. So, this curfew, I should explain that the snap curfew that would have been authorized under the city council's legislation that the mayor vetoed would have been aimed at those under 18. I do think there was some value to it because these older criminals who have been arrested in some cases, I think, are taking advantage of the cover provided by these hundreds or thousands of kids who show up. So, mitigating that crowd, reducing the crowd size, I think has a value in ameliorating that crime.
Right. Linda, you want to weigh in on that?
No, yeah.
Okay, good. We'll go to number 4 then. Who of the following from Illinois do you believe has had the greatest positive influence on the state's national reputation? We asked 4, 5, or 6, 7 individuals, and these are the numbers. 38% said President Barack Obama. 29% said Pope Leo. 24% said Michael Jordan. 2% said former U.S. Senator Paul Simon. 4% said President Ronald Reagan. 3% said Oprah Winfrey. And 0% said former U.S. Senator Hillary Clinton. Wow, I was kind of surprised at some of those numbers. Pope Leo came in high at 29%. He kind of knew. But then, Barack Obama, at 38%, which I think would be an obvious choice for a lot of folks. I'll go to Linda on this one, and we'll start it off with you.
Yeah, I thought that Obama would have been up, above 50%. Pope Leo has made a lot of headway in a short amount of time. Good for him. But
that's the power of the spirit.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Oprah, I'm surprised her numbers are not better than that. And Michael Jordan, yeah, but Paul Simon and Hillary Clinton, yeah, I'm not surprised that their numbers weren't greater than that.
Mike, I'm sure you have a strong opinion.
Well, there are 3 ways to look at this. There are 3 groups here. One, is overall the total audience of the public out there, and I think Pope Leo and Michael Jordan are transcendent figures who transcend the politics. Yeah. And then there are those on the left and those on the right, and clearly Barack Obama, a hero for many Democrats in Illinois, in Chicago. If you were to go downstate, talk to Republicans, there was once a move to make a mini Mount Rushmore along the Mississippi River, Tom, at a point where there's a rocky outcropping in southern Illinois over the river, and there was an effort to make an Illinois Mount Rushmore, but it was really focused on Ronald Reagan and memorializing him in stone along the Mississippi River.
I always learn things from you, Mike Flannery. Who knew? I had no idea about that. I always learn stuff from you. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
And they were, there were the presidents that were going to be memorialized, with ties to Illinois, Abe Lincoln, and Reagan and Obama. It hasn't gone anywhere, I think, because there have been objections from ecological folks who say, wait a minute, we're not going to deface this beautiful rock face here, this beautiful cliff.
We'll go to the next question, the 5th question, which is, kind of
Yeah, I love this one.
this is a fun question, and Colleen Dudgeon does such a good job in producing all of this. Which of the following do you think is most likely to happen? The Cubs win the World Series, 13%. The White Sox have a worse season than last year, 11%. The Chicago Bears announce a move to Arlington Heights, 76%. So there you go. You both worked with the chairman of the board of the Chicago Bears, who was at Channel 2 as a young writer. And Mr. McCaskey is a good friend of both of yours. What's your take on that?
Well, I don't claim to have any inside information that George McCaskey has shared with me, but I think you and I were at a dinner table with him one night, Tom, and
right.
and we went around the table, and I said flatly, I think they're going to Arlington Heights. George was admirably taciturn. His lips were sealed.
There you go. Every one of these we do, Linda, he'll come up with a word or a term that's multi-syllable and will make me shrink in my mind some more. Taciturn. That's great, Mike.
Today's word is taciturn.
Yeah. And he was right.
You got no greater insight after that dinner about what was about to happen or what would eventually happen.
I did not. Mr. McCaskey is keeping his cards close to the vest, but the Bears have said that they've reopened negotiations to potentially end up out in Arlington Heights without totally closing the door on Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, what about back at you two? I think you are. Maybe it's not known, but I think you're both White Sox fans, right?
Right. I think the White Sox actually would do better than they did last season. They'll still be terribly in the dark when it comes to wins. The Cubs with, maybe another pitcher they can pick up somewhere along the way here. I think the Cubs have a clear shot at the playoffs. And with a little bit of luck, they've got a couple great hitters, one budding superstar. Big time. They could really go places in the playoffs. I think the Bears are already going to Arlington Heights. There's no way the city of Chicago can accommodate the NFL schedule when they need a stadium. And there's nobody in Springfield with any kind of chutzpah that's going to come up with $1 billion for them. So, if they're looking for government help in the city of Chicago, they're not going to get it. They certainly don't have a timeline for it. Barack Obama is still trying to finish his monument that they're building on the south side. It's not going to get there. Arlington Heights is kind of a perfect spot for them. The train goes there. They got all the highways. They're close to the airports. They can do a Super Bowl there within 5 years. And the money for that part of the world is going to be gargantuan. If I were the Chicago Bears, I wouldn't waste any time. I'd start building.
Well, and they have all of that racetrack land there, Tom. It's it's roughly the same size as the tract on which that sports and real estate entrepreneur built SoFi in Inglewood, California. Where both the Rams and the other NFL franchise, the Chargers, they're both playing there now, and there's all kinds of other development going up. There's real estate,
hotels,
residential
parks,
towers, hotels, commercial, restaurants.
Everything.
All of that could or something like that could go on at that site in Arlington Heights. Now, I will say the former mayor, Tom Hayes, there has assured the restaurateurs and the boutique operators in what is currently downtown Arlington Heights that he was not on board with creating a brand new downtown and creating competition for them. But I think inevitably that kind of development is going to be taking place.
Yes, it's going to be like Lambeau Field did. They had the NFL draft there a few months ago up in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was kind of chilly. They put 266,000 people in their square, and they had all these different amusement situations for all the fans and everything else. There's 100,000 people that live in that town. They had 266,000. So I can't imagine, why they don't start building in Arlington Heights. They need to show that they're doing the best to try to stay in the city of Chicago, but Chicago's
why do they need to show that, Tom? Why do they need to show that?
I'll jump in and answer that.
Legacy.
Because Well,
Go ahead.
there's financial reasons as well, because the Chicago Park District, there that redo of Soldier Field
Uh-huh.
from 30 years ago,
Right.
'Costs
30
a lot of
plus
money.
years ago,
Yeah.
still hasn't been paid for. And
Really? I didn't know that.
there are
Wow.
hundreds of millions of dollars in bonds that remain outstanding, haven't been paid off. And the city of Chicago has enough votes down in the General Assembly to block a move to Arlington Heights that leaves that debt unattended. So those orphan bonds have to be paid off. That I think, Tom and Linda, is the final stumbling block.
Interesting.
Right. With the revenue, though, I think that's just not an academic exercise, but it's a financial one. You're talking billions. When you're talking the NFL. Uh, I just, I wish the city could keep them. I wish the city could move quicker. I wish the city knew how to be managed better and more properly. I wish the city, could do
It'd be a
that.
shame if they left. I mean, it would be a shame if they left. I get
Well,
it, but it would be a shame for the city if they left.
Look, if
What
we had a
did, what
different
did Mayor
mayor,
Daley say, Mike? Remind us what Mayor Daley said about the Chicago Bears.
Richard J. Daley, at a news conference in 1974, where Papa Bear Hallis had just announced that he was looking at buying the Arlington Park racecourse.
Right.
And Old Man Daley called a snap news conference. I raced over from the Sun-Times office. I was still a wet behind the ears cub reporter. And I said, well, Mr. Mayor, what will happen if in the end they do move to Arlington Heights? And he looks at me and he says, well, they won't be the Chicago Bears. They can't call themselves that. They could be the Arlington Heights Bears. They'll never use the name of the city of Chicago.
That's very good, Mike. That's so good.